Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out today. I know we're already halfway through January, but this is the first time I've seen most of you this year, so Happy New Year. I truly believe that 2010 holds great success for each one of us because we've been working so hard. We deserve a great year, don't we? My name is Pam Herneisen. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for the Courtyard by Marriott Los Angeles West Side, and I am the new president for our chapter. Thank you. I'd like to welcome all of you to our luncheon today with our very special speaker, Mr. Bruce Baltin, Senior Vice President and Executive in charge of the PKF Consulting Practice in Los Angeles, and one of the most respected members of the hospitality industry, not just in Los Angeles, but nationwide. We are very honored to have him here with us today. Topics that Bruce will cover today include a market-by-market lodging analysis for Southern California areas, the development pipeline for 2010 and beyond, how what's going on will affect your future business, and if we have time left, and if Bruce has time for us, we'll take some questions from the audience. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our 2010 Board of Directors, but first I'd like to introduce our gracious host. Carl Sprayberry, CHA, is the General Manager of the Marriott Los Angeles Downtown Hotel.
We would like to again recognize Bruce Baltin and thank Bruce. It's nice to have somebody like Bruce who'll be here who we can actually reach out and ask questions to that can give us the insight on the industry and what's going on. So it's a pleasure and always very informative, and it's again we appreciate it, Bruce, and thank you for being here for us. We'd like to also take a minute and just recognize HSMAI for what they do. And again, Libby being on the education side of it, asked me to specifically mention the education side. And I think it's important that we keep education in our industry always moving forward. And HSMAI does that very well. And Libby cited an example to me that I think is very good. Last year, 2009, which was a very rough year, I think, for most everyone in most industries. But a lot of times the hotel companies wouldn't spend or couldn't spend the money to send people to travel and train, and HSMAI, does provide that for us at a much more economical expense. So we appreciate that, and we thank HSMAI for that. And that's really it for me. Thank you all. Have a great day. Have a nice lunch and a Happy New Year. Thank you, Pam. Thank you.
Today's luncheon program with Bruce Baltin will begin shortly, so please enjoy your lunch. Now I would like to invite Libby Zarahi, Director of Sales and Marketing for the hotel, and our Vice President of Programs and Education to the podium for welcoming remarks.
As Senior Vice President and Executive in charge of PF Consulting in Los Angeles, Bruce oversees the firm's asset advisory services practice on the West Coast and holds special expertise in economic, financial, and operational analysis for the hospitality industry. He conducts investment analysis, market demand studies, asset advisory services for all segments of our industry.
Where we are at this point in time, again, it's really no surprise. This has been very difficult for all of us to live through and work through, and all of you to live through and work through. It is by far the worst recession that has occurred in the United States since the Great Depression. And it is one of the few times where hotel demand actually dropped more than the drop in employment and or the drop in GDP. Normally, hotel supply and demand, hotel occupancy is really very closely tied. You look at a 30 or 40 or 50-year trend, whatever it is. When you're doing your forecast on a kind of ongoing basis, normally if you look at the general economy and you say, okay, if the GDP is down 3%, if employment is down 2.5%, hotel demand is going to be down about 2%. That generally mirrors the case, and it really tracks pretty well over time. It really has only veered from that twice in recent history. One time was in 2001, following the terrorist attacks, and therefore the shutdown of airports and things like that, and therefore there was a huge drop, obviously, in hotel occupancy and hotel demand in the fourth quarter of 2001 and the first half of 2002. But this is the second time. And I think this was the demand drop this time was again, very dramatic. It was more in the range of, on an annual basis, hotel demand dropped about 8%. This seems to drop about 7 to 8% this year versus in 2009 versus 2008, whereas GDP dropped about 3.5%, so about twice that level. And nobody's really quite sure why. Part of it is just I know there's some. Part of it is the fact that really all three major demand segments were clobbered at the same time, which really is unusual. The group meeting segment was really hurt by not only the overall economy, but also the publicity about meetings and some of the rhetoric that came out of Washington early last year, and some of it was taken back and restated, if you will, later in the year. But as with everything else, the apology is always much harder to find than the actual statement itself. So there was definitely a negative PR attack on the hotel industry in the early half of the year. Then plus the fact that consumer confidence was at an all-time low and has remained at an all-time low. And normally, when you're coming out of a recession in terms of the hotel industry, and especially in Southern California, recovery is really led by the consumer side and then followed by the business side. And that certainly occurred in 2002 and 3. That's why kind of the effects of the downturn in 2002, 3, and 4 to some extent were mitigated in Southern California by leisure travel and by drive vacations and those kinds of things. We didn't see as much of that last year as one would have expected to see. And I think that was because, frankly, the shock value of what was going on in the economy affected everybody across the board. Consumers, businesses, group meetings, and everybody. So, and kind of the whole economy just hunkered down. And that's one of the things that made it so hard to understand what's going on. And one of the things that made it so difficult to project what's going to happen. And we are seeing at this point lots of signs of life. And in terms of numbers, just to give you the numbers real quickly, overall RevPAR in Los Angeles County dropped last year right about 20%. It's actually 20.8%. And that was about half ADR and half occupancy. About 10% drop in occupancy last year, and about a 10.5 to 11% drop in ADR. That's compared with a national drop in RevPAR of about 17.5 to 18%. So LA County fared slightly worse than the overall national economy did last year. And again, that's unusual. That's one of the few times that we fared worse. Normally, you would expect LA to fare better than the national economy because we have so much intra-regional tourism travel we can generate, and so many of the hotels and so many of you were really aggressively marketing staycations and mini vacations and weekend getaways and stuff like that this year. And normally we would expect there would be quite a bit of that. And that did not take hold as much last year as one would have hoped it would. At least not enough to offset the drop in group travel and the declines in the luxury segment in the West Side, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. The pain was pretty much spread across the board in terms of the declines. If you look at, we tracked 26 submarkets, I believe it is, in LA County. And there is about 4 or 5 submarkets or sub-tiers on the west side of the very high-end hotels, really where the declines were in the 25 to 30% range on a RevPAR basis as opposed to 20. Then there were a few markets that were really more in the 50s.
I look forward to seeing all of you at our next meeting. That's scheduled for Tuesday, February 16th at 11:30 a.m. at the 4 Point Sheraton, Los Angeles West Side. The topic is our revenue management panel, moderated by Barbara Kirklighter, who is here with us today. Please mark your calendars. All of our events are listed on our website. We also list events on Facebook and LinkedIn. So if you haven't joined us online, please take a look. We have some great things there. And also, you'll be getting a survey via email, so you can grade us on how we did today. We'd love to hear your feedback and hear your ideas for future meetings so that we can continue to improve. So thank you so much for coming today. We truly appreciate your support. Have a safe drive back to your offices. This meeting is adjourned.